in the dating world, we're creating those men. Every single time we put up with below baseline behavior, with every time we step into the nice girl and someone cancels last minute and we say, oh no, it's fine, or we don't want to have expectations and we don't want to own our truth with what we're actually looking for, we're teaching men that they can get away with that. So essentially, as much as we want to shift the blame onto the other team and say, actually, no, we're all good, we're perfect, they're the problem, it's a completely bi-directional relationship. And a lot of women that come to me that are looking for support in finding love and stepping into their truth and meeting better men, firstly, there's a lot of reconditioning that has to happen around what we're attracted to. And the first place I'll go is, why are you?
Hi there. Welcome to the Aligned Living Podcast. I'm your host, Kathleen Galatly, and I'm super excited to have you join us. In these episodes, we're going to have some heart-to-heart conversations with experts, everyday wellness enthusiasts, and, well, anyone with a story to share about their journey towards a more balanced and harmonious life. Welcome to the Aligned Living Podcast, where well-being meets wisdom, and the journey is just as important as the destination. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 26 with Tatjana. Today, I'm very excited for this one. We've been kind of working on getting a date set for this conversation, and as things are, it's episode 26 on the 26th of March. No coincidence there. And just feeling super aligned and excited for the conversation. So thanks for listening. Those of you who are listening, those of you who are watching on YouTube, I hope that you enjoy watching this full episode. And without any further ado from me, we'll jump straight into it. Tatjana, thank you so much for being here and for making the time. We actually met on a retreat that you facilitated. It was my first women's retreat that I ever went on, and ended up being one of those monumental decisions that you make to go to one thing and has such a profound ripple effect throughout the rest of your life. So just feel super honored to have you here, and yeah, for you to be sharing a bit about your story and your work. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I think you can kind of just kick it off for anyone who doesn't know you, a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and then that little question that I love to ask of any moments in your upbringing where you kind of had that feeling of, okay, I can see things differently, or I'm starting to see life a little more for what it is.
Thank you so much, love, for that beautiful introduction. I'm really excited to be here with you too. And I always love how life weaves in these unexpected ways. Little would we have thought, I think it was now 4 years ago where we met, that we'd be sitting here a few years later with you doing all this beautiful work. So yeah, my name is Tatjana. I work as a trauma-informed therapist. I did my master's in psychotherapy, but the beginning of my journey into this work and this world was very much grounded in yoga, meditation, sound healing, and for a long time, also working in the Tantra space, mainly with women, doing a lot of embodiment work, a lot of reconnecting to the feminine, but also working with couples and doing couples counseling and that kind of thing. So my path has been very non-linear. It feels like it is forever changing, and really truly, as I grow and evolve as a person, it really feels like my work and what I offer and how I work with my clients is constantly shifting and changing. And that's been really, really beautiful. It's been so beautiful to watch that path unfold before me without trying to control it or steer it in any way, but actually just trust that wherever it leads me is where I'm meant to work right now. So currently, my main area of focus is working with groups, but also in a one-to-one space, working with therapy as a modality actually to get into the subconscious mind. So I combine talk therapy with hypnotherapy and brainwave recursive therapy, depending on the context and the intention behind the container of working together, to really help people to overcome blockages and limitations that they have in their subconscious mind, which essentially holds all of the beliefs that we have about ourselves. It's like this big storage bank of memories, and essentially those memories and our life experiences are what creates the patterns and the neural programs about how we engage with the world and how we perceive ourselves in relation to the world. And those programs and those neural imprints are essentially the blueprint of which we will then operate within the world and engage with the world. So it's really fascinating when you start digging into that. And I really love this work, because for a long time I was missing this deeper layer of unraveling and of rewiring and of really seeing long-term tangible results and change in people that I personally, as a therapist, just wasn't really seeing in people with just standard talk therapy. So it's really amazing to interweave these two and to really work on the deeper layer, but then also work into the past, but also into the future, and look at really having awareness of what has happened to you, how it has informed or affected your present moment, your current reality, your behaviors, your patterns, but then also how we can rewire that and what actionable steps you can take into really stepping into a future that feels more authentic, that feels more abundant, where you're really essentially living the life that you've dreamed of. So it's a really beautiful space that I'm working in right now, and I do love it dearly. I'm running quite a few retreats, and also actually working as a mental health consultant for corporate companies and smaller businesses to help them kind of improve the quality of life of their workforce, which is really enriching. So that's a little bit about me and my work. I was raised in South Africa, but I have German roots. My family is German, but I spent the majority of my life here in Cape Town until I was 19, and then I moved to the UK to study. Spent 3 years there, kind of doing my undergrad degree in psychology, but at the same time immersing myself in a lot of trainings around yoga, meditation, breath work, sound healing. Then moved to Indonesia for 2 years through COVID. And actually, that's when I started my business online, through COVID being a time where online working was very accessible. And a lot of people really needed the support and the help of this kind of work. And then moved to Amsterdam about 2.5 years ago now. And I'm now again in a big period of transition where I've actually decided to leave my life in Amsterdam behind, and I'm on the search for a new home, and I'm kind of again just letting life take me to wherever I need to go. And yeah, I just love moving around and meeting new people and building new communities, and also being able to work in different spaces, cultures, contexts, and really seeing what's needed by people in that space and adapting and adjusting what I offer to really meet the needs of those that I'm working with, as opposed to creating a one size fits all model and hoping that that kind of helps, actually making it a lot more personalized and having that personalized approach to mental health care, which I've found is really so effective and so powerful.
Mm. I'm just like sitting here and I'm just like, sign me up, sign me up, sign me up. And it's amazing because what I love about everything that you do and what you speak to is that it isn't a one size fits all. And even though you've got this whole toolkit of tools, of support practices that every client that you work with, this client might use this, and this client might use this, and this might be appropriate for this person on this day, and this person for this day. And I think that that is so important, and it's a reflection that I often have to remind myself of, is this thing of and I speak about it a lot, is like the difference between ritual and routine, of how the habits or the things we do that are good, when they become this routine, might not actually be the things that are serving you. And so I think if COVID taught us anything, it's that like the only constant is change. And being able to, like, for someone like you who moves around from place to place, I know that I'm someone who, like, I quite depend on my house to be like my base. And if I'm away for like 4 or 5 days, like I get back and I'm like, okay, I can like breathe and I can relax back in my space. But if you're traveling, if you're moving around, I'm sure there are some career paths or jobs, where people find themselves away from home a lot. And then what are the practices and the tools that you have to keep yourself grounded, to keep yourself connected through all of that? And there are so many. And so I'd love for us to dive into the hypnotherapy with you, because I think that very few people know what it is. I've got a friend here in Hermanus who does hypnotherapy, and I tell people about her, and one of the first things that people say is, "Ooh, does she do those things where she like makes you do things that you don't know that you're doing it?" Like the stage hypnotherapy, the theatrics, and the things. But it's as someone who's done a lot of work with yoga nidra, I have so much yeah, I'm so inspired and drawn to it. I actually have not gone for any hypnotherapy myself. I think there's a little bit of a block going on there, but I would actually love to experience it. So perhaps just for those who are like, don't have a clue what it's about, yeah, if you maybe just share a little bit about a little bit of I don't know, the history of it, or how it's commonly used, or maybe how it's commonly misused, and what it's all about.
Amazing. I love that question. And it's so interesting how you speak about that resistance, as it's something that I see so much in my practice. And I think a large piece of that resistance comes from misinformation and the media portraying hypnotherapy as this really big, scary thing where you get up on stage and someone hypnotizes you and you run around quacking like a chicken for 10 minutes. So often when I do like a free connection call with all of my clients as I work with them really, really deeply. And it's really important for me to know and feel that connection, and for them to meet me before they step into that really deep sacred container that we create together. And I get this question a lot on that first call. And I'll take you through the process in a minute so you can really understand essentially what happens and what a hypnosis actually is, because it's a state that our brain knows very well that we as humans go into a lot throughout the day. But I think that misinformation piece is really big, is that people don't know what to expect. And the second layer to that is, I think a lot of us have been taught that our subconscious mind is this deep, scary Pandora's box that has like all of these horrible things hiding inside it. And God forbid we open it, because we'll never be the same. And a lot of my clients will say to me, I don't want to do hypnotherapy because I'm feeling really good right now and I'm actually really happy, and I don't want to dig up the past and suddenly be facing all of this trauma I didn't know I had. And the thing that I always say to people is, the thing about the subconscious mind is that no matter whether you look at it or not, it's still impacting your life. In the same way that I'm sitting on my MacBook Pro right now looking at my computer, in the same way that I cannot tangibly pick up the software that is running on this computer right now and hold it in my hand and look at it and play with it, it's still running the Mac. Even though I can't actually see it, I'm seeing the product of it, which is all of the programs that are open right now. We're on Zoom, I can see my mails open, all of these things are open. So the software is there, even though we can't actually tangibly see it and feel it. And it's the same with the subconscious mind. A lot of us think that if we don't open it and we don't look at it, it's just not going to really affect us. But the truth is that, as I said, it is the neural blueprint of every single one of our actions and our behaviors. And most of those programs that we are running on as human beings are created in the formative years of our life, in our childhood. Most of our beliefs around love, around our self-worth, around our bodies, around money, all of these things are created and programmed into our brain between the ages of 0 and 7. So for a lot of us, we don't even have memories from this time in our lives because it's so early. And I'll have a lot of my clients who will come and they'll say, my parents had a really good relationship. Like, I don't understand why I have these attachment issues, or why I am so emotionally avoidant and all of these things. But it's actually because maybe there was a significant event or relationship that happened in their early years. For example, the passing of a grandparent they were really close to, or losing their dog, or one of their parents getting ill, or something like that, that actually they cannot even consciously remember, but has created a massive ripple effect throughout their subconscious mind and has created a lot of these patterns that they don't even know are there. And really what we do in the sessions that I facilitate, and again, every hypnotherapist works really differently. I interweave a lot of my kind of multidimensional trainings into the way that I approach the hypnotherapy process. And the way that I work and the way that I was trained in all of the trainings that I've done working in the subconscious mind is really at this intersectional point between spirituality and science. So as much as a lot of the things that I do in my work is based in neuroscience and real academic research, there is also this element of spirit and of understanding that when we work in the subconscious mind, we are also working in a realm that is quite untangible. So people will have these really transcendental experiences where I often work with people where they are processing grief. For example, a lot of my clients have lost a parent to illness or accidents or that kind of thing. And we will actually have these really beautiful moments of closure where the spirit or the soul of that person will come in the session and they will be allowed to move through and process a lot of the grief that they weren't able to process at the time. And it's really beautiful to merge those two worlds of science and spirit and bring them together and acknowledge that it doesn't have to be one versus the other, but actually they do walk hand in hand. And that's really where I see the future of therapy going and the future of healthcare going in a way is really becoming a bridge between these two worlds. And because I've had my academic trainings in this field and I've spent the past 6 years or 7 years in academia studying the kind of more scientific based approach to therapy, but then have also thrown myself into like shamanic tantra retreats where you're not working with science at all and you're just constantly every day being confronted by the depth and mysticism of the world of spirit. Bringing those two worlds together has been really, really fun. And I think that hypnotherapy really sits at that intersection and it really creates the space for you to cultivate awareness, but then to also actually choose a different path forward. And the thing with the brain is if we don't rewire the patterns of our brain, if we don't actually change the software on the computer, we don't press the update button on our Mac 2012 software now in 2024, that Mac is going to be running on 2012. We can talk about updating it. We can tell the computer to update it. We can say all the affirmations in the world, hoping that the computer updates. But if we don't actually go in and press the button, it's never going to update. And that's what I see with a lot of people who have become stuck in talk therapy or life coaching, that they're unable to create change and they constantly hit this roadblock and they're like, oh, I was doing so good for 3 months and then I fell back into the pattern. And I hear this a lot from people. They try so hard. All the intentions are there. They really want to change. But the truth is they haven't upgraded that software. So their brain is still running on the same neural pathway and the same neural pattern. So essentially, what we do in hypnotherapy is we go into the behavior, the pattern, the belief, and we go to the root cause. We understand where did it come from. So in a lot of my sessions, I do naturally take people back into their childhood because a lot of the root cause memories are located here. And the way that we access the subconscious mind is through no crazy tricks. There's no pendulums or anything like that. It's actually just a guided meditation. And essentially, what happens when we relax the body and we encourage the mind into a place of relaxation through a guided meditation, we're going from the beta brainwave frequency, which you and I are in right now. Our brains are very active, alert, engaged, into alpha and theta. And alpha and theta is essentially hypnosis. So hypnosis is just a fancy word for our brainwave frequency slowing down and going into alpha theta. So for example, yoga nidra, people are entering the same state of mind as they are in hypnosis, in a sound journey, even in other yoga classes, when you're going into a deeply relaxed state, you're in alpha theta. When you wake up every morning and go to sleep every night, you're in alpha theta. When you're driving to and from work or to the grocery store and you get there and you're kind of like, oh, I don't remember getting here. That's actually your brain also in alpha theta. So the first thing I always say to people when they inquire about working with me is actually hypnosis is something you know really, really well. And it's something that you go into really, really easily. And it essentially is just this calmer state of being with your eyes closed. I work 100% online right now because I'm moving around a lot. When I'm based in a place, I do work one-to-one with people in person, but you're essentially lying in your bed, on your couch, on your yoga mat, and you're just being taken into the state of alpha theta. And once we're there, we're able to locate the root cause through the process that I take people through. So you go back into the root cause memory. Yes, this can be really hard. It can feel really messy. I say to people, revisiting those painful memories, it's not going to be the most fun thing you've ever done. But what happens when we go back is that we're able to reprocess the information, the emotions, and really let go of the emotions that are still being held in the body. Often, when we're triggered, for example, if someone doesn't text you back and you're really triggered by that, a lot of the time you're not actually triggered by this instance right now about this person not texting you back. Often what's being triggered is maybe a really deep core wound of not being a priority. And that core wound may stem from your early childhood. Maybe your parents were really preoccupied with work and you never felt like you were a priority. So you're holding this belief right now. And every time anyone in your environment does something that even slightly brushes that trigger of I'm not a priority, you'll become reactive. And what we're trying to do through the hypnotherapy process, we're not really trying to erase trauma or remove these experiences from your life. We're trying to reduce the emotional charge around that event and rewire the beliefs that that event created for you, in order for you then now in your current state of being to be less reactive when those triggers do come up. For example, then suddenly I have this happen with clients all the time. Someone won't text them back and they won't even react. They won't even actually think about it. They'll be like, it was crazy. My boyfriend didn't text me back for a day. And like, I wasn't panicking or feeling weird about it. Like the reaction is actually just gone. And the other thing that it does, it allows us to now show up and make decisions from an empowered, embodied place and an authentic place where we're not being controlled by these beliefs of I'm not a priority. Because a lot of the time I see my clients reacting from this place of the belief. They believe they're not a priority. What do? Maybe they go into a response of fighting with their partner. Maybe they fully withdraw from their partner. Maybe they just stop making plans with that person because they believe I'm not a priority. And then suddenly the relationship disintegrates. And that's actually all you just acting from a place of your trauma because you can't see clearly what's actually happening. So I often say to people, imagine that you're currently walking through life wearing these glasses, that everything you look at, you're looking at it through a lens of I'm not a priority. And now you're taking off those glasses and you're just putting on clear glasses. They're just allowing you to see the world through a neutral lens. And suddenly your whole reality changes. And that can be applied to everything and anything. I work a lot with anxiety, depression, addiction, body dysmorphia, eating disorders, complex trauma cases. I work a lot actually also with women who have experienced sexual abuse, partly because I had my own experiences with that in my early childhood. And I often find that as a therapist, what you've worked through on a deep level, often the clients that will come to you will be a mirror of that because there's that energetic resonance. So really, truly, you can work with anything because everything has a root in the subconscious mind. So it's a really fun place to work because every client I get is different and every person I get to work with has a different story. And there's a lot of beauty and power in that and seeing really how these things that have happened to us in our early life really have created the reality that we live in.
Sure. Thank you. That was very thorough, but very clear and very well said. It's super, super interesting. And I, yeah, as I was sitting here now and just reflecting, and especially coming to the end of the conversation now here, for me, I think what comes up is, so I've done also like quite a few different kinds of therapies and found support in different ways. And talk therapy has always been extremely helpful for me. I've been doing talk therapy for years and years and years. And I've had many different therapists. And also feeling like I needed something to go a little that like step that layer deeper. It was also around a sexual trauma incident and ended up doing eye movement therapy, where you're also taken back to a traumatic moment or a time where something specific happened. And then by using the eyes and the movement of the eyes, you're accessing the different parts within the brain and the release occurs. But what was interesting for me was that it was extremely re-traumatizing because I'd actually done it the first time I did the EMT was around the death of my grandfather because it was super traumatic. We were like there and it was like, yeah, it was very hectic. And then I was like, okay, cool, but it really worked. It helped me so much to move forward from that. So I was like, well, if it helped for that, then it might help for this. And I actually found it really re-traumatizing to the point where like I was like, yeah, I really struggled to then actually move forward from that again. So I guess my question is to use in which way do you work? You said you do work with quite intense trauma cases and clients, because I think that is a big thing, like you mentioned earlier, is I don't want to look at that again. I don't want to talk about that again. I don't want to go back there. I don't want to remember it. Like I just want to forget about it. But like you say, just because you put it out of like the mind, the cognitive mind, or your awareness right now, it's still potentially there. It's still running. So I guess my question to you is how do you navigate that with clients?
There's a multitude of ways, and honestly, I don't really have a one size fits all model. It really depends on the person. Normally, if it is someone where from the kind of discovery call that we have and the initial meeting that we have, I know that there's quite a complex trauma history. I will always say to them that we will most likely need multiple sessions. And at this current time, I actually don't really work with people once off anymore, because I find that so much happens, so much depth and release happens when you are in a consistent container with someone and are really working through the spider web and ripple web of these experiences. One trauma can have many impacts in our lives, and with the reverse of that, many different things in our lives. One certain behavior in our lives can also have many different root causes. So the mind is a very intricate thing. But normally the first principle that I work on is that I will never force someone to go where they are not ready to go. As I said, I have a lot of people who have experienced sexual trauma, grief. I've worked with people who had complex PTSD, normal PTSD, Iraqi war veterans, that kind of thing. And the one thing that I will not do is force someone's brain to go into a trauma memory if it's not ready to go there. And normally the process that I apply when people have gone through, for example, a sexual trauma or something really intense, is that I will say to them, if your brain takes us there today, then we will go there, but I'm not going to encourage you or force you to go there. And sometimes that means that it can take 3, 4, 5 sessions for that person to build up the trust and the emotional resilience and the nervous system recalibration that also happens through the sessions, for them to be able to be in the space and move through that. In other cases, I do also work with brainwave recursive therapy that is less focused on the event itself, but rather on rewiring the reptilian brain into what reaction we would have wanted to have had, or what outcome we would have wanted to have seen. And that's a modality that's still quite new. It's in its infancy. It's only been around for about, by therapy terms, infancy, it's about 15 years old now. And they're just about to release the first study in Norway about like the incredible therapeutic outcomes they're seeing with this modality. So it's very new, and I kind of will adapt and adjust my therapeutic approach between the hypnotherapy and the brainwave recursive therapy, depending on what the person needs and wants and what they're resonating with more. And that really is just an intuitive process that I go through as I start to meet someone and get to know someone. But in my experience, when you adapt this approach of not forcing someone, like I'll often have people come in and they're like, okay, I want to work on my rape. And I'm like, okay, that's not how we're going to approach it. I really respect and encourage this bravery to want to go right there. But what I'll rather look at is what's happening in your life right now. What are the areas that are the most painful, the most challenging? What is causing you suffering? And then take them back into the root cause of that. And maybe that is that event. But actually, sometimes what happens is with, for example, sexual trauma in our mid to late adulthood, which a lot of women will experience, there's a root cause in a relationship much earlier, where, for example, we just learned that weren't allowed to have boundaries. And that was actually what caused this, for example, instance of sexual violation to happen, because we weren't able to speak our truth, because we went into a freeze response, because we weren't able to defend ourselves. what we're actually interested in is, why did that happen? What was lying beneath that? So often when I work with women, for example, who have been gone through sexual assault in their for example, teens or early 20s or whatever it may be, we'll actually go even further back and really work through the layers of childhood. And I do the same with people who struggle with addiction or eating disorders. A lot of the time there is so much more beneath the surface than what we're able to actually see. And my main thing is really making sure that a person has the emotional and physical resources in order to be in that space, and to trust that if that's not something we're meant to look at and the mind doesn't feel like we need to go there, then we won't. And we can be equally as successful in working through all of these other things. And sometimes someone can have really, really complex trauma and have multiple traumatic events, but sometimes you find if you work on 3 of 5 or 8 out of 10 of them, suddenly other ones will also dissolve because suddenly the brain is just working in a completely different way. So it's such an individual process that we take someone through, and it really, really is constantly changing and evolving. And I can never say to someone, you're going to need 3 sessions or 6 sessions or 10 sessions. It's really a matter of figuring that out as we go along and allowing the process to be non-linear. And sometimes I'll jump on a session with someone and we're meant to do hypnotherapy that day, and immediately as we jump on, we'll start talking and I'll be like, I just feel like, is this really serving you today? Or would you rather actually just spend an hour doing talk therapy and we call it a day? And they're like, how did you know? So sometimes it is, and you have to be flexible. You can't force anyone to go anywhere that they don't want to go. And often that's when the re-traumatization happens. And I've seen that in myself, going to a lot of trainings, being pushed into doing like really deep shamanic breathwork journeys and having facilitators really push to go to the depths when actually I didn't have the resources and the ability to go there. And you can always pull yourself out of it, but it's much harder, and it takes a lot of integration and a lot of work. So I always say to people, trust that what is meant to come up will come up. Trust that things will plonk on your path when the trend of doing a plant medicine or doing these things for the sake of doing them, and not actually because they feel this deep readiness and there's like a knowing in your mind, body, spirit, heart, you're ready to step into this space. And they do it, and then they end up having these really intense, sometimes horrific experiences where they're like, oh my God, I'll never do that again. And it's brought up so much of my trauma and all of that. But the truth is, were you really in integrity and moving from a place of intentionality when you stepped into that space? So it's really about, and often I find that's where the talk therapy really comes in, and that's why I combine both with my clients. It's also having someone there that can be a mirror and can be a sounding board and can really ask you that question. What is your intention behind going? Why are you doing this? What is your intention behind doing hypnotherapy or ayahuasca or whatever it may be?
Take a breather and explore the Aligned Living on-demand video library, along with our exclusive membership perks. Plus, our YouTube channel is already up and running, offering even more wellness content. Your path to holistic living is just one click away. Visit our website to learn more. And now, let's return to our inspiring discussion.
So that you can also reflect on that and really make sure that it's coming from a place of truth, and you're not just doing it because all of your friends have just gone and done an Aya ceremony and you think it's really cool, which is something that we're seeing a lot. And a lot of the time, those people then later come into intensive therapy because suddenly it's open Pandora's box and they didn't have the support that they needed and all of that. When actually, if you come in from a place of integrity, authenticity, of really following that soul call, that knowing in your body that this is right. I've had only beautiful experiences. Yes, they've been hard, but they've been massive catalysts for growth. And I've never come out of it being like, oh my God, what have I done to myself? And I think that's where this piece of reconnection to self really comes in, of we won't be able to feel whether it's right or follow the feeling or know what our intuition is if we've been completely cut off from that for our entire lives. And that's a big piece of the work that I do to people. Is the first step is rebuilding self-trust, rebuilding self-connection, rebuilding a really deep line or point of channel of energy between your head and your heart, and really knowing this is my truth. This isn't me acting from societal conditioning or expectation or thinking it's right, but actually not wanting to do it. This is my truth. This feels really right, as opposed to, I think this is right. And that's a big thing that people struggle with. And that's a lot of my work with people, is actually just rebuilding the connection to self.
I have so much to say about all of that, and I feel like I've got like nothing to say at the same time. Um, resonates so strongly with so much of what you said now, and it made me think of there's this podcast that I follow, My Favorite Murder. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's two women who they're actually both comedians, but they're also obsessed with true crime. And they do some amazing work. Like it sounds kind of silly and a weird combination, but they actually do some amazing work. But one of their kind of taglines that they say a lot is "fuck politeness," and that's really in connection with women and how what you were speaking to now, and that's not even going into boundaries in the sense of like no is no, but something as simple as being in a breathwork session, being in a yoga class, being in these safe spaces where people are facilitating things and you're not wanting to go into something, but you're just too polite. You're just too polite. So you just go, okay, well, I'll just, they want me to do this, so they've asked that. So like I'm gonna just go ahead and go into that. And I think that is such a root thing for women to that we're all working through is this politeness, which just walks like that hand in hand of not having those boundaries. And when you said that you can take the trauma incident and you might kind of pinpoint like everything in my life has kind of been what it is because of that point of trauma, but where did that stem from? What came before that? And I think that is so insightful, and that is such a like aha moment. And to anyone who's listening, is to know that there is so much more potentially, and it is about that bit of bravery and discovery and going in when you feel ready, but also more importantly with someone who you feel safe with to hold space with. And I think to do those initial discovery calls is like so important, so important. And what I wanted to, so I wanted to just share, I think, a little bit of with my kind of bipolar journey and how one of the biggest lessons that I took from it was awareness, in the sense of our emotions coming up as these little communicators and almost like can be these little guides, but they can also be due to trauma response and triggers. And then, of course, if you've been, and I kind of just say like I was diagnosed with bipolar. And so, through an educated assessment through one or two individuals, it was said that, this is what we're going to work and treat. And what the eye opener was for me was, I think before that diagnosis, and so diagnosis aside, but before that diagnosis, I think it's very human nature that if you're feeling a certain type of thing, it's very human to want to attach it to something, to a memory, to a person, to a reason, to an event, to kind of justify why you feel the way you feel. Because if you know why you're feeling the way you're feeling, because it is because of X person, then you can change what's going on with X person, and then you don't have to feel the way that you feel. So trying to find, those reasons. And when I had the diagnosis, what happened was it was like, oh, but Kath, sometimes your brain is just producing different levels of chemicals within itself. So you're actually feeling very low or you're feeling very high. And regardless of the energetics behind that or the reasoning behind that, for me to be able to sit in it and sometimes not have to attach it to a specific memory or situation or whatever, to be able to just like let it go and just allow myself to feel that in the moment was really such a big lesson for me. And with what you said now, it's like it's making my mind, like the wheels of my brain, like turn so much. And so yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think there's there's just heaps in this conversation, and I think the big part of it for me, like how it makes me feel listening to everything that you say, is it actually just gives me like the feeling of like hope. Because I
Mm,
think often you can feel very overwhelmed with things. You can feel like, well, it's too late now. You know, what happened happened. And, you know, whether there's shame or blame or guilt around that, which I know there's for a lot of people, that it is never too late. And
mm,
that there's always, as long as you're here, as long
mm.
as you're breathing, as long as you are sitting right here, that there is always the opportunity to find support and to make a change. And there are so many ways in which you can do that.
So true. It makes me think of someone really, really close to me has recently, at the ripe age of 67, decided to go into therapy. And that for me is just such a beautiful reminder that it is never too late. And we do have the power to change our reality and completely change the trajectory of our lives. And we have no idea what a single decision like going to a retreat or starting therapy or going to that workshop or whatever it is, we have no idea what seed that would sow. I went to my first like Tantra women's retreat. I think it was 2018 or something. And at that time, I just finished studying psychology. I had no idea what I wanted to do in life. I actually was just really lost, but okay with being lost. I was like, if there's ever a time to be lost, it's now. I'm 21 and I'm having the best time of my life, just traveling around, kind of figuring things out. And that retreat was the seed that was planted and actually blossomed into the work that I'm doing today. And actually, 5 years later or 6 years later, I ended up facilitating a women's retreat in Italy, in Tuscany, with my roommate from that retreat, who at the time was a health coach. So it's crazy. And I mean, even yesterday, I was sitting at one of my best friends' homes in Scarborough, and we were sitting at this table with like such beautiful humans, all people I love so dearly. And one of my
Mm,
friends turned around from me and he actually said, Tats, do you realize that your retreat that you ran last year in January here in South Africa was the seed that started all of this? Because that's how this person met you. And then she met all of these other people and we built this community. And you never realize what seed something will sow. And it's never too late to step into that place. And it's never too late to step into your truth. And I love this piece you say about politeness because it's something I see so much, how we're so afraid of triggering people by not doing what they want us to do or being, I think a lot of women are in this like nice girl archetype. And I see
mm,
it even in yoga classes, how 5, 6 years ago, if the teacher was doing a flow that really wasn't working for my body, I would do it because I'd be so afraid of offending her by doing something different. Whereas
mm,
when I started deconditioning and rewiring my mind and rewiring also my own triggers to when people don't do what I want them to do, they're not actually saying no to me, but they're rather saying yes to themselves. That's
yeah.
completely translated into the way that I approach now. Just the other day, I went to Yoga Life in Noduk and I was on the mat and we started doing a flow where I actually felt in my body, no, this doesn't feel good. And it was about 3/4 of the way during class. I just stopped, dropped, and rolled and did my own practice for the rest of the class.
Mm,
The most beautiful thing was afterwards, the teacher came to me and she said, really want to celebrate you for honoring your body and for not forcing yourself to do something that you want to do. That really shows the amount of time you've spent practicing. Because if you can practice in a way that is aligned in your body and are not practicing from the mind, but practicing from the body, that shows how much self-connection there is there. And that really translates into how I show up in my relationships now too, as much as a lot of my friends say I'm this like very light, feminine, soft, sweet, kind, nurturing human being, I can also be really ruthless and hard. And I have my boundaries in place. And this shows up a lot in my love life, in my dating. And I speak to so many women about this, about love and how we show up. And so many of my friends are in dating situationships where honestly men are not treating them well and they're doing things that are not okay. And I say to them, if you would just step into your truth and your self-worth and your authenticity and show up in a way that is going to make that man meet you at the place where you're at, you will see that the way that men show up completely starts to shift. And I've seen that in my world too. And it's interesting because a lot of women I work with have this narrative around like men suck and there's no good men out there and all the good men are taken. But the truth is that in the dating world, we're creating those men. Every single time we put up with below baseline behavior, with every time we step into the nice girl and someone cancels last minute and we say, oh no, it's fine, or we don't want to have expectations and we don't want to own our truth with what we're actually looking for, we're teaching men that they can get away with that. So essentially, as much as we want to shift the blame onto the other team and say, actually, no, we're all good, we're perfect, they're the problem, it's a completely bi-directional relationship. And a lot of women that come to me that are looking for support in finding love and stepping into their truth and meeting better men, firstly, there's a lot of reconditioning that has to happen around what we're attracted to. And the first place I'll go is, why are you choosing the emotionally unavailable person? What is it in your past that has made you feel like love is something that is unstable, like you don't deserve to be treated right, like you don't deserve to have your needs met? Let's work there first. Let's deal with the past, rewire that so that you can see the behavioral shifts in your future. And then let's look at, how do you show up in the future when someone cancels on you half an hour before your date? Are you really going to say, don't worry, do you have time next week? Absolutely not. What is the new, more empowered, more powerful version of you gonna say? And this will then translate into your family relationships, your friendships, your work dynamics. And I can see that often when we work on one aspect of someone's life, the ripple effect it creates into their whole world is just phenomenal, because it is working with those deep root causes of things that actually we don't realize how intricate the spider web is until we work on the thing and we realize just how holistically and multidimensionally it's impacting our lives.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you jumped into a bit of relationship stuff now, because I know that is also where one of your kind of zones of genius lies. And I wanted to, and I'm going to bring this in here, like ironically, because I think when most people hear the word tantra, they are, again, I think the same as the hypnotherapy, so many preconceived ideas of what it is and what it's about. And so I'm wary of time, but maybe just taking a few minutes just to share, again, just like a little bit of the basics of just a little tiny, I know like the history is huge, the practice is huge, but a little tiny bit of like, in a nutshell, maybe even, from your perspective and how you've worked with it and what it's done for you personally, like on a personal level, and maybe perhaps in a relational level, in your life.
So in essence, there's many different streams of Tantra. There's many different approaches to it. The way that I was trained and the way that I was teaching when I was still active in that world, I no longer really teach Tantra courses or workshops. I interweave it into my retreats, but I very much stepped out of that space. But it's still a massive foundational part of my work and of who I am and how I engage with the world. But really at its core is to create more connection, and for us to not just connect to ourselves more deeply and others more deeply, but also to connect to this feeling of oneness we have with everything that surrounds us. And really, at its core, Tantra is trying to bring us home to this universal energy or source energy that is held within every being and every cell of everything that is on this planet. And that can be done through so many different ways. The way that I was teaching was completely non-sexual Tantra, where you would just use practices like eye gazing, like breathing together, like non-sensual sexual touch as modalities to bring yourself back into either deeper connection with yourself if you're practicing alone, deeper connection with another person. I would often do a lot of tantric practices actually just with friends, where we would just do these like really beautiful connection practices that had no sexual connection interwoven in them whatsoever. As far as I remember, even the retreat you came on, we did this tantric practice between other different women, and it was completely non-sexual, non-sensual. It was just this magical heart opening, like here is two souls sitting and connecting with each other. And I've really found that when we step into this place of deepening that connection, we're deepening the connection we have with ourselves, we're deepening the connection we have with other people, and we are really truly starting to step into, as you mentioned, you know, that aha moment when we start to see the world more clearly, and we start to acknowledge and understand that there is much more to this life than just the material experience in the physical body. And again, I find that Tantra can really be this bridge between the physical world and the non-material, multi-dimensional world of spirit, where we can really kind of start to bring the two closer together and realize how they're connected. So it's a really beautiful practice. It was one of the hardest things I faced in that realm, is whenever you bring it up, people would immediately assume it's group orgies and all of that kind of thing, which it can be. There is definitely a part of the Tantra world that is that, but there is so much more to it. And there's actually a really beautiful book, I can't remember the author, but it's called Introduction to Tantra. And it's, I'll actually find the book for you and I'll share it with you so you can share it in the show notes. It really looks at the spiritual and philosophical base of what Tantra is, as opposed to what it has been made by the Western world. And that, for anyone who's curious and interested, is a really, really amazing way for you to start to step into that place and that space and connect more deeply to those parts of yourself. And I think for every single person, what they're wanting to get out of that journey is so different. When I first stepped into the Tantra journey, I was actually celibate for 2 years, and I was just practicing Tantra alone. And it was a big vessel for me to heal my sexual trauma and to reconnect to my body and to build or rebuild this relationship that I had lost for a really long time. Whereas for other people, they may step into it with their partner, wanting to reignite the passion, the love, the connection. So everyone may have a different intention, and I think it holds a lot of magic for every single person that tries it. And maybe you have an intention going in, maybe you don't. Maybe you want to get something out of it and you get out something completely different. Maybe you get exactly what you came for. But again, you will never really know until you try. And I always say to people, if there's a spark of curiosity, just jump in and give it a try and see what happens.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it really is this thing of what the Western world and TV and movies and series and whatever it is. I know like my most cringy is like whenever anyone puts like a yoga scene in a movie or a series, it's just like and I talk about yoga as in like simply the asana in the tights and the whatever, and no judgment against that, but it's so far from the truth and it's so far from the essence of the practice. And so I think, like you say, if there is that spark, if you've seen something or you've heard about something and it just interests you, perhaps you've seen these things, you've got these ideas of what it is, but perhaps ask yourself, how much do you really know about it? What are the origins? Where from? Like, who was practicing this? Like, how did this even come about? Who practices it now? Who teaches it now? I think that's important to keep in mind. But thank you for sharing that, a whole episode just on that. I am very sure. I always ask, I kind of want to bring this in with the work that you do with your clients and the things like the hypnotherapy and potentially doing some trauma work. I'm sure because I know for me, when I'm going through a lot of things, I need to make sure that I'm like supporting my nervous system even more. So like we should all be supporting our nervous systems all the time, just because of the external stresses, the world that we're living in, the global panic, the global stress, and then our own stuff that we're working through. But when you are going through additional work where you are asking yourself to go a little bit deeper, to maybe nudge some boundaries in supporting the nervous system, maybe if you could share practices, 2 or 3 practices that you would perhaps give your clients to support themselves. But I'd also be very interested to know what are your practices that you do daily, weekly, or any ritual that you have felt has really, really supported you through these processes as you have gone, deeper into yourself?
Beautiful. I love that. I think the first thing that comes to mind is that I do try have really intentional mornings, and that can be a lot harder when you're moving around. I was just in Mauritius for a month with my best friend and some other friends of mine, and that can be really challenging when you're sharing a room with someone and then you get up and you immediately start chatting and all of that. But as much as I can, for me, intentional mornings just mean keeping my phone off for the first 30 minutes to hour if I can. It means whether it's reading my book, doing a workout, going for a surf, doing a meditation. I don't, as you said earlier, when rituals become routine, they kind of lose the magic. And for me, for a long time, when I first stepped into this journey, I was very much like wake up at 5, practice Ashtanga yoga for 3 hours, do an hour of meditation, chant, like it was very regimented. And I've actually learned that for me, I want to wake up every morning and see how I feel and then base my morning around that. I know there's pillars of my day that I will always have, whether that's movement or stillness or whatever. But whether I wake up and read my book for 30 minutes or immediately get up and go out for a walk or dance in my kitchen drinking cacao or go and surf, like that is very much like a day by day thing. But I do try and give myself at least 2 hours in the mornings before I start work. And I am in the lucky position that I can schedule my working day in a way that I only start work normally around 9 o'clock. Giving myself those 2 hours to really just be with myself and enjoy and be creating this grounded energy. So that's a big one. I love yoga nidra and yin yoga. I've been teaching yin yoga for a really long time now, almost 8 years actually, when I count back. And I absolutely love yin. So that's a big one that I'll constantly and always come home to. Being out in nature for me is just always so restorative for my nervous system, whether it's a walk in the mountains, a swim in the ocean. When I'm in a city, just even trying to get into a park and just take my shoes off and be on the grass or immerse myself in a body of water. So those are kind of things that everyone can really access. In terms of nervous system reset practices, one of the easiest and my favorite ones is the 4-7-8 breath. It's really, really simple. You just inhale for a count of 4, hold the breath for a count of 7, and then exhale for a count of 8, which is super powerful for resetting the nervous system. You can do it anywhere. I do it in my car. I've done it in meetings. I sometimes do it with clients if they're feeling overwhelmed. You don't need anything for it except your body and a brain that can count. And the other one that I love that people can actually access through my podcast, I'm trying to think where I have a link to the guided practice. There is actually a podcast that I have on my podcast, which is called Self Health with Tatjana Lucia, which is an episode actually on understanding your nervous system. It's one of the first episodes I ever recorded. And in the show notes of that episode, there's a link to a guided practice by me called understanding. It's called a non-sleep deep rest practice. And it's essentially a really beautiful practice that you can do. It's, I think, 15 minutes that allows your body to really rest, rewire itself, come back into a state of homeostasis. It really reduces cortisol. It allows you to basically recalibrate your whole body. And it's most effective or powerful. I love doing it in the afternoon when I get my little like afternoon dip around 2-3 o'clock. But you can also do it whenever you're feeling really, really triggered. So you can find it there on my podcast in the show notes of the Understanding Your Nervous System episode. Maybe I'll just share the link to that episode with you for the show notes and then they can easily find it. But that is probably also one of my favorite practices. That's really easy. And then a third one that takes a little bit more external support or environmental support is I love a sauna ice plunge combo. It is my ultimate, or just a cold swim. We're so lucky here in South Africa because the ocean is freezing. You have like your free ice bath down the road. But even when I'm in Amsterdam or anywhere really, if I can get into a sauna and an ice bath like 2-3 times a week, that for me is the ultimate. But I normally say to people, do what's accessible for you. If your gym happens to have a sauna and an ice bath and you go to the gym already 3 times a week, amazing, because the barrier to entry is very low. Whereas if you're someone who lives out, like I know when I'm living out in Scarborough, there's no sauna and ice plunge nearby. So naturally, I'm going to go less. I'm not going to sit in the car for 45 minutes to go and sauna and ice plunge because the traffic I sit in and getting there in a rush is probably going to counteract the positive nervous system effects that I'm getting from going to the sauna and the ice plunge because I hate driving and I hate traffic. So It's also picking your battles and seeing what is accessible to you. But on my podcast, I have one episode on understanding the nervous system, and then I have another one from recently where there's 8 practices to reset your nervous system, where I actually go into them. So I'll share those with you for the show notes, and then people can also find my podcast if they're interested in listening to more of this, really. And I can't wait to have you on there as a guest soon too. It's so lovely to reverse the roles and get
Oh, goodness.
beautiful questions about your work and your journey.
Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, please send me those links. We will add them in the show notes below for sure. I will also put all the links to everything you do. And then so just before we head into the kind of final part of you and where people can find you and what your latest offerings are, I wanted to ask the question that I ask kind of everyone who comes on here. What does living an aligned life look like to you? Or what does living in alignment mean to you?
To me, it really feels like having this deep-rooted connection to yourself. And it feels like really knowing what your truth is, as opposed to what people tell you your truth to be, or what you think maybe your truth should be based on society's expectations. And to be okay with the fact that your alignment and your truth may be so completely different from anything you've ever known, and that it may not fit into a box. And that's something I've really had to learn with my life. It doesn't really fit into a box, and it's often really different, and often a lot of people don't understand. And when there's a lack of understanding, often there can be judgment. But being okay with that, and I think when you really truly deeply are in alignment with yourself, people can give you all the judgment and all the thoughts in the world about how what you're doing is wrong. When you truly believe that it's right and you know that it's right, that won't matter. And also being okay with the fact that that truth can change all the time. I've moved through like so many different versions of myself, and chapters in my life, chapters of my work, chapters of versions of me. I've been in different places, and really finding in that what is through, what is the red thread that runs through all of these different versions of me, and really finding that and connecting to that part of you, and allowing everything else that is the add-ons and the different expressions of that to be what they want to be, and to give yourself the grace of being this transient, ever-changing, ever-evolving human being that we actually all are, and taking away the expectations of having to be a certain stagnant way for the next 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of your life.
Mm, mm, mm. So beautiful. Thank you. These answers are like my favorites. It like just expands me so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Where do people find more of your lovely self? What's the easiest way to get in contact with you? Is there anything, I know you've got, I don't know if your retreat is sold out, but I know you've got a retreat coming up, I think.
Coming up in May in Tuscany in Italy. There is still a few spots left. So if you're curious, people can find that on my website. The easiest way to get in contact with me is through my website. I actually offer, for people who are curious about working with me one-on-one, I offer a free 30-minute self-help consultation where I essentially meet with you on Zoom and we dive into what's happening in your world. And I essentially help you map out what areas of your life you can be putting more energy into, coming back into alignment in, and giving you some advice and some recommendations. If after that you decide you actually want to work with me more intensely, that's okay, but it's essentially a completely non-committal space, as a little freebie of here's a way you can kind of reboot your life in a really beautiful way. So you can find that on my website alongside with the information to my retreat. There's also a contact form if you just want to pop me an email. My assistant will send that on to me. And the place where I'm most active is definitely my Instagram. My Instagram handle is Tatjana__Lucia. So that's TATJANA__LUCIA. And I'm very, very active on there, as well as on my newsletter as well, which you can also find through my website, where I share some things that are not shared on Instagram. And then I have my podcast, which is Self-Health with Tatjana Lucia, which is also weekly episodes, some just of me speaking about different tools and practices that can support you, different aspects of our self-health that are really important, that I'm seeing are common themes for a lot of my clients, but then also wonderful guest speakers every other week that are coming on to share their wisdom and knowledge with the listeners. So have a look at that. And otherwise, if you would like to ask me anything about the episode or share anything, I love engaging with people who are listening to these podcasts. So please don't be shy to pop me an email or send me a DM on Instagram, and I'll get back to you and we can connect there.
Perfect. Yeah, I always say there is no such thing as a stupid question. And the fact that Tatjana and I are both sitting here now having this conversation for you guys to listen to should be your indication that we love what we do. We love talking about these things. Our passion, our commitment, and really our devotion to this work is our purpose. It brings us joy and it keeps us real. So please feel free to reach out. All the info will be in the show notes. You can pop either of us a message, and we'd love to hear from you. So yeah, those who are perhaps watching this on YouTube, please make sure to leave a comment. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to leave it in the comment section as well. Subscribe, and then most importantly, share with anyone you feel might need to learn some more about hypnotherapy, anyone you feel would benefit from anything that was said in this episode, or someone you feel should connect with either of us. Tatjana, thank you so very, very much. Honestly, I've loved this conversation. And I say this after every episode. I'm like, I'm going to have to go and just sit and process all of that now. Because as much as, we're having this conversation and we're engaging, it's, we're in this as well. And I'm always constantly reflecting on everything that guests say. So thank you. Even if no one listens to this, girl, you've made such a difference for me today. So thank you so much. And yeah, I'm looking forward to potentially being on your podcast and otherwise doing a episode 2 with you here on the Aligned Living podcast.
Yay, me too, love. And I will make sure to send you the pre-podcast interview form, and you can just fill that out and then we can book something in, because I'd love to have you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day. I'm going to run and just quickly ground before my clients. Big kiss.
Beautiful day, everyone. And we will see you on the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Aligned Living podcast. We hope you found inspiration, insight, and a fresh perspective on your journey towards holistic well-being. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Remember, your feedback fuels our mission to bring you valuable content that aligns with your life. Stay connected with us on social media for updates, and feel free to reach out with your thoughts, questions, or suggestions for future episodes. We would love to hear from you. But until next time, take good care of yourself, embrace the present moment, and remember, you are your own healer. Thank you for being a part of our community. Goodbye for now.